Hey guys, tonight we dive into something that might seem simple at first, but trust me, it's deeply fascinating. We're exploring how snowflakes get their perfect shapes. Yes, you heard that right. Forget the idea that a snowflake is just a frozen raindrop or a generic winter decoration for a moment. We're going to peek behind the curtain of nature's winter workshop, all the way into the hidden world of crystal formation that rarely makes it into textbooks in a way that truly makes sense. What really gives each snowflake its unique, six-pointed design? How can a tiny speck of dust and water vapor transform into a delicate ice crystal with intricate patterns? And is it really true that no two snowflakes are exactly alike? And if so, why is that? Brace yourself for some mind-expanding and wonderfully intricate details. This won't be a dry lecture, but it will be fascinating. Before we dive into this scientific journey, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a gentle fan or some soft background sound. Let your mind settle from the day. And if you enjoy these late night science explorations, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me continue these journeys into the beautiful world of science. Feel free to let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the global community gathered for these stories. Now, take a deep breath and relax. Let's ease into tonight's journey together, into the incredible world of snowflakes, and uncover the beautiful details of how these icy crystals actually form. Imagine for a moment that it's a calm winter night. You peek outside your window and see gentle snowflakes drifting down from the dark sky. The world is quiet, almost muffled by the fresh snow blanketing the ground. Streetlights, or perhaps the silver glow of the moon, catch the falling flakes, making them sparkle like tiny stars as they float silently through the air. You take a deep breath. The air is crisp and cold, and it carries that special clean scent of snow. Somehow the scene feels comforting, peaceful, and slow, as if nature itself is whispering a lullaby. Each snowflake that lands on your windowsill or your sleeve is unique. A delicate little work of art that melts in seconds, leaving you wondering, how did that tiny, perfect crystal come to be? Maybe you've paused on a winter day to catch a snowflake in your glove or on your tongue, marveling at how it disappears as soon as it touches you. It makes you wonder about the journey it took. How did that little icy pattern form up there in the clouds before it landed and vanished? Now, let's drift upward, high into the clouds above, and explore the journey of a single snowflake. High in the sky, the air is frigid and thin. Millions of microscopic water droplets are floating up there in the cloud, chilled well below the usual freezing point. They are so pure and tiny that they haven't turned to ice yet. They remain liquid in a delicate, precarious state, what we call supercooled droplets. It's as if these droplets are waiting, poised for a cue to transform. Picture one of those ultra-cold droplets, colder than any ice in your freezer but still liquid, wandering through the cloud. It drifts until fate brings it to a tiny particle, maybe a speck of dust, or a bit of pollen, or even a microscopic ash particle from a far-off volcano. At that moment, the droplet suddenly has something to cling to, a template upon which to solidify. In an instant, the droplet freezes around that mote of dust. It happens faster than a blink. One moment it's liquid, the next it's solid ice. This is the birth of our snowflake. When that droplet freezes, something beautiful happens. The water molecules, which were freely jostling around in the liquid a second before, suddenly lock arm in arm into a crystal structure. they arrange themselves into an orderly pattern. And not just any pattern, but a hexagon, a six-sided lattice that will define the snowflake's shape. It's like the water molecules all line up and say, okay, everybody hold hands at this angle, and the angle they choose creates a six-pointed form. In that split second, our newborn snowflake is not a random lump of ice. It's a tiny hexagonal prism, far too small to see, but perfectly structured. Think of it as a microscopic gem with six faces, a little piece of ice with a hexagon outline, perhaps only a few hundred molecules across. That hexagon is the foundation for the snowflake's entire future. You might be curious why it is a hexagon. Why six sides? The answer lies in the nature of water itself. Imagine each water molecule as a tiny V-shaped being, two hydrogen atoms like outstretched arms, and one oxygen atom like a head at the point of the V. These molecules are like little magnets. They have slight positive charges on one side and a negative charge on the other, which means they tend to stick to each other in a very specific orientation. When water freezes, each molecule reaches out with its arms and connects to others, forming a kind of repeating pattern. Because of the angle between those arms, about 104 degrees in the water molecule, the most efficient, stable way for them to join up in a solid is to form rings of six. It's a bit like six friends joining hands in a circle. The ring naturally comes out hexagonal. Those rings of molecules stack and layer to build a crystal, and so the ice crystal itself inherits that six-fold symmetry. In short, the very way water molecules bond forces the crystal to have six sides. Every snowflake carries this fingerprint of water's geometry. From the very first moment that little droplet turned to ice, it became a tiny six-sided prism, the simplest snow crystal in its nascent form. Interestingly, even long before scientists figured this out, people noticed the six-sided nature of snow. Over 400 years ago, in 1611, the astronomer Johannes Kepler took note of snowflakes always falling with six corners. Imagine Kepler strolling through a chilly morning in Prague, seeing snowflakes landing on his sleeve. He was so fascinated by their geometry that he wrote an essay titled "On the Six-Cornered Snowflake" as a New Year's gift for a friend. In it, he pondered why nature favors this six-fold symmetry. Kepler didn't know about water molecules or hydrogen bonds. Those were secrets yet to be discovered. But he speculated that perhaps there was some fundamental geometric reason. He even mused that maybe tiny spherical particles packed together in the most efficient way would lead to six-sided crystals. In doing so, he essentially intuited the concept of a crystal lattice and the idea of atoms or molecules arranging in structure centuries before those ideas were formally established. It's amazing to think that over 4 centuries ago, in a time before modern science, a keen mind was already trying to peek into the mysteries of snowflakes and coming very close to the truth. Now, with that tiny hexagonal crystal formed, our snowflake to be is ready to grow. It begins to drift downward through the cloud, and as it does, water vapor in the air starts to attach to it. Remember, the air up there is full of water molecules, even if it's too cold for liquid water droplets to remain. There is always some water in the gas form. Those water molecules are drawn to the frozen seed like iron filings to a magnet, sticking to the surface of the little ice crystal. They land and freeze onto it, one by one, and the ice crystal begins to grow outward from its center. At first, the crystal might grow fairly uniformly into a slightly larger hexagon, maintaining that flat, six-sided shape for a little while. But very quickly, differences emerge across the crystal's surface. The 6 edges of the hexagon present themselves as natural gathering points. In particular, the 6 corners of the hexagon, the points where 2 sides meet, stick out just a little further into the air than the flat sides do, so they start to collect more water molecules. Imagine wind or a flow of tiny molecules blowing against a tiny hexagonal plate. The corners catch the breeze a bit more. Similarly, in the microscopic ballet of diffusion, the corners of the hexagon get more than their fair share of the incoming water vapor. As a result, those corners begin to jut out even further, like sprouts growing out from the main stem of a plant. Each corner becomes the tip of a developing branch. Now our snowflake, still microscopic, is no longer just a flat disk. It's sprouting 6 tiny arms. The process feeds on itself. As the arms grow longer, they themselves stick out into the path of water molecules and thus capture even more. This is a positive feedback loop. Scientists call it a branching instability. In simple terms, any little bump that sticks out will grow even faster because it's exposed to more vapor, leading it to stick out more, and so on. This is how delicate branches can suddenly start rapidly growing from a once plain crystal. In our snowflake's case, 6 bumps turn into 6 arms stretching out from the original center. Now, as the snowflake falls slowly through the cloud, it continues to grow. Each of the 6 arms grabs more water vapor as it moves along. And here's the fascinating part. All 6 arms usually grow in sync. Why? Because the conditions around the snowflake, temperature, moisture, airflow, are nearly the same for the whole crystal at any given moment. It's a small object after all. So whatever the air is like on one side of the snowflake, it's almost identical on the other side. It's as if each arm of the snowflake is being guided by the same invisible conductor, keeping them in harmony. If one arm experiences a bit more humidity, the others do too. If the air turns a touch warmer or cooler, all arms feel that change together. The result is that the 6 arms tend to develop very similar shapes, almost mirror images of each other. The snowflake is essentially practicing a form of molecular symmetry, building 6 matching sculptures at the same time. They are nature's own mandalas, 6-fold radial symmetry drawn in water. You'll never find a natural snowflake with 5 or 8 arms. The physics just won't allow it. So whenever you spot an 8-pointed snowflake ornament or drawing, you can smile knowing real snowflakes stick to 6 or occasionally 12 when 2 crystals join together. The snowflake doesn't plan this. It doesn't know it has 6 sides. It's simply following the fundamental rules set by water molecules and the environment. But the outcome is a beautiful symmetry that we can admire. Now imagine we could zoom in and actually watch this process happening in slow motion on a single arm of the snowflake. You'd see those arms lengthening bit by bit, molecule by molecule. On each arm, tiny side branches might sprout as well, especially if the snowflake is growing rapidly in a moist part of the cloud. It's a bit like branches on a tree growing smaller twigs. Each arm can develop its own little subdivisions, perhaps a smaller 6-pointed star pattern forming at the end of a branch, echoing the snowflake's overall shape in miniature. This self-repeating, self-similar pattern gives the snowflake that feathery, lacy look. If conditions allow, our little crystal may grow from something microscopic to something perhaps a couple of millimeters across, big enough to be visible to your eye, all while it is still high up in the cloud. Despite its growth, our snowflake is incredibly light. The intricate pattern is mostly empty space. Remember, it's a framework of ice with a lot of air in between, so the snowflake falls slowly, almost hovering as it descends. How slowly? A typical snowflake might fall at just 1 or 2 miles per hour. 1 or 2 meters per second. That means it can take a long time, maybe tens of minutes, to travel from the cloud to the ground. It doesn't drop like a rock. It glides, swirls, and floats. Often, snowflakes even meander side to side or spiral as they fall, their broad shape catching the air. You can imagine each flake almost like a tiny parachute or leaf, drifting back and forth as it makes its way down. Because of this leisurely pace, snowflakes spend a good amount of time in the air. During that journey, they can keep growing until they leave the cloud or the available moisture is used up, and they can experience changing conditions. A snowflake's path to the ground isn't always a straight line or through uniform conditions. A lot can happen on the way. At some point, our snowflake might fall out of the cold cloud layer into slightly warmer or drier air below. When that happens, its growth slows and might even stop. It's as big and elaborate as it's going to get. Now it's just a delicate ice crystal falling through the sky. It might encounter other falling crystals on the way down. Occasionally they bump into each other. Sometimes they stick together, forming those fluffy, fat snowflakes that we see when the weather is just around freezing. You know, the kind that seem to float down in big clumps. On very rare occasions, dozens of flakes can conglomerate into something enormous. There was an account from Montana in 1887 of snowflakes almost 15 inches wide, larger than milk pans. Likely those were many wet flakes fused into one falling mass, but still, imagine a snowflake that size drifting down out of the sky. More commonly, a falling snowflake might pick up a few smaller crystals and become a little cluster by the time it lands. And if it falls through a layer of supercooled cloud droplets, it might collect a frozen coating and turn into what we call graupel, little round pellets of soft ice that look more like tiny hailstones. If the journey goes through a warmer patch of air and the snowflake partially melts, then refreezes, it can turn into sleet, those little ice pellets that sometimes pitter-patter on your jacket. All these are possibilities, and each one shows how a snowflake's pristine shape can change or even be lost before reaching the ground. But let's say our snowflake remains solitary and intact on its journey, a perfect 6-armed star with all its delicate patterns preserved. As the snowflake travels downward, it could encounter many adventures in the cloud layers. It might pass through different layers of air, slightly warmer, slightly cooler, more moist, or more dry. These changes can leave subtle marks on the snowflake's design. For example, our snowflake might drift into a layer of drier air at some point. In that moment, its growth could slow dramatically or even pause. The delicate tips of its arms might stop extending, and in very dry air, they could even start to shrink a tiny bit, subliming back into vapor. The snowflake might lose a bit of its feathery detail, as if taking a breather. Then, perhaps a few seconds later, a gentle turbulence carries it into a more humid region again. With moisture replenished, the flake resumes growing, maybe sprouting new side branches where it had paused. It's almost like the snowflake comes back to life after the brief hiatus. These pauses and spurts might leave subtle signatures in the crystal, little changes in the spacing of side branches or slight differences in how thick parts of the arms are. In effect, the snowflake's design is recording a log of such environmental encounters as it falls. All the while, gravity is pulling our little snowflake toward Earth. But remember, it's not a straight plummet. It's more like a graceful descent. The snowflake is so light and has such a broad shape relative to its weight that air resistance keeps it drifting slowly. Some snowflakes even wobble or spin like tiny frisbees as they descend. It's a peaceful journey, one that can last a long time. Some flakes may take around 30 to 45 minutes to go from cloud to ground, depending on the cloud's height and the air currents. During that time, our snowflake has fully developed its pattern and experienced the cloud's nuanced environment. Now, the shape a snowflake grows into, whether it becomes one of those stellar dendrites with arms radiating out, or a simpler plate or a slender column, depends a lot on the exact conditions in the cloud. Temperature and humidity are two of the biggest factors. Our snowflake happened to form in conditions that favored a star-like shape. But if it had formed in a slightly different part of the sky, it could have looked very different. Let's explore that for a moment, because it's one of the most fascinating aspects of snowflake science. Scientists have discovered that at certain temperature ranges, snow crystals tend to adopt particular shapes, and humidity, how much water vapor is available, further influences how simple or ornate those shapes become. In general, the recipe is like this. At comparatively warmer, sub-freezing temperatures, just a few degrees below 0 degrees Celsius, say around -2 degrees Celsius, which is about 28 degrees Fahrenheit, snow crystals often form as small, flat, hexagonal plates. These might be pretty simple, little 6-sided wafers of ice, sometimes with slight patterns or facets, but usually without a lot of branching. If you were out on a day when the snow is falling at just below freezing, you might notice the flakes are tiny and not very intricate. Those could be these plate-like crystals. Drop the temperature a bit further, to around -5 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Fahrenheit. In those conditions, snow crystals often grow as long, slender columns or needly crystals. Instead of flat flakes, you'd get what look like tiny ice needles or hairs. These are harder to see with the naked eye unless you have a magnifier, because they don't show the broad, starry profile of classic snowflakes. They're more like little sticks. Sometimes, when the wind blows them, they can even orient vertically and fall as ice needles that make the snow look almost like glitter. People sometimes describe certain snows as sparkling. That can happen when the snow is composed of myriad tiny columnar crystals catching the light. Now take the temperature down much colder, around -15 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the range where nature really gets fancy. At those temperatures, and especially if the humidity is high, meaning the air has lots of water vapor, you get the large, ornate stellar dendrites, the kind of snowflakes we often imagine, with 6 broad arms and lots of side branches, almost looking like ornate ferns or stars. These are the showpiece snowflakes that you might see in close-up photographs, each one a tiny work of art. They can grow big for a snowflake, maybe a few millimeters across or even larger under exceptional conditions, and extremely complex. If you've ever been outside during a snowfall and caught a flake on your glove that was big enough to clearly see its pattern with your naked eye, it was likely formed in this temperature range. The environment at -15 degrees Celsius just perfectly encourages that plate-like branching growth. If the air gets even colder, say below about -20 degrees Celsius, which is -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and downwards, something interesting happens. The snow crystal shape can shift again. Often, in very cold air, the humidity is lower. Cold air holds less moisture, and snowflakes that form in those conditions tend to be smaller and simpler once more. You might get little plates or compact crystals, or sometimes even columns again. In polar regions or in the depths of very cold winter nights, instead of big snowflakes, you might see what is known as diamond dust. That's when tiny ice crystals, often simple prisms, form in the air and glitter as they slowly fall, catching the light like a cloud of tiny diamonds. These crystals are essentially snow, but in a very diminutive, delicate form, often too small to discern individual shapes without a microscope. Humidity, as mentioned, plays a crucial role as well. When the humidity is low, not much water vapor around, snowflakes grow slowly. They tend to be smaller and have simpler shapes, maybe a plain hexagon or a column with smooth faces. When humidity is high, meaning the air is rich in water molecules ready to deposit, snowflakes grow more quickly. Rapid growth encourages more branching and elaborate patterns because the faster the crystal grows, the more instability in the growth front. Little protrusions get exaggerated. So high humidity combined with the right temperature is what gives us the most elaborate snowflakes. Think of it like this. A slowly grown snowflake is like a carefully, slowly baked pastry. It might come out in a simple form. A quickly grown snowflake is like a pastry that expanded rapidly. It can puff out and have lots of flaky layers. In crystal terms, slow growth equals faceted, smooth crystals. Fast growth equals branched, ornate crystals. All these variations mean the sky produces an incredible library of snowflake forms. Scientists and observers have cataloged a whole menagerie of shapes. Beyond the familiar stars, dendrites, and simple plates and columns, there are combinations like capped columns, a column with plates on the ends, as we talked about, sectored plates, flat plates with patterning that looks like a star etched on them, kind of a mix of plate and branching, bullet rosettes, clusters of columnar crystals that spread out from a point, often found in high clouds, needles, and more. Some snow crystals even form twin prisms or odd shapes when two crystals start to grow attached to each other in the cloud. There are also irregulars, which is basically the category for any snowflake that doesn't have a neat, symmetric shape. In truth, the majority of snowflakes probably fall into this irregular category because they might collide or break or grow unevenly. Those picture-perfect stellar snowflakes are a bit like the prize flowers of the snowfall. Not every flake gets to be so perfect, but the ones that are catch our eye. And let's not forget, sometimes the ice that falls from the sky isn't in snowflake form at all by the time it reaches us. As mentioned, snowflakes that get battered by turbulent clouds can turn into hailstones, which are quite different. Round, layered ice balls, grown by being hurled up and down in a strong thunderstorm until they get heavy enough to fall. Hailstones have none of the elegant symmetry of snowflakes. They are more like the boulders to a snowflake's flower. Sleet is another form. Essentially, snowflakes that partially melt on the way down and refreeze into little ice pellets. So when winter weather is coming, there's a whole menu of ice forms we might get, depending on the atmosphere's whim. Now, considering all these factors, the temperature changes, humidity variations, collisions, it's practically guaranteed that no two snowflakes will ever be exactly alike in all their details. Each one goes through a unique journey, a unique sequence of microenvironments in the cloud. To get two identical snowflakes, you'd need to have two snow crystals following the exact same path through a swirling, dynamic atmosphere with the same starting size and shape, gathering the same molecules at the same times and places. The odds of that happening are astronomically small. We often hear the phrase, "No two snowflakes are alike," and from everything scientists have observed, it holds true. Wilson Bentley, the snowflake photographer we'll talk about in a moment, examined thousands upon thousands of snowflakes under his microscope in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and he famously noted that he never saw an exact duplicate. Modern science, with its ability to capture images of snowflakes and even analyze their structures, concurs. While it's not impossible in theory for two to be the same, In practice, it's effectively never been seen for fully developed snowflakes. Very tiny, simple crystals could coincidentally be similar, but those are so simple that it's like saying two pebbles might look alike. Possible, but once you get any complexity, differences abound. Ornate snowflakes have so many molecules arranged in so many intricate ways that the number of possible patterns is effectively endless. To appreciate just how many possibilities exist, consider the number of water molecules in a decent-sized snowflake. It could easily be on the order of 10 to the power of 18 molecules. That's a billion molecules. The way each molecule attaches during the growth, one after another, is influenced by tiny fluctuations in the environment. The permutations of how a snowflake can form are mind-bogglingly large, effectively infinite from our perspective. Meanwhile, think about how many snowflakes fall. It is estimated that around 1 septillion snowflakes fall to Earth every year. That's 1 trillion snowflakes per year globally. Over all of history, you're still nowhere near exhausting the possible designs that could form. Let that sink in for a moment. Nature is cranking out these tiny works of art by the septillion, and yet the combination of circumstances needed to replicate one exactly is so far-fetched that for all intents and purposes, each one is unique. Every time it snows, you're essentially witnessing an endless gallery of one-of-a-kind masterpieces that exist for but a moment. It's a profound thought. Nature produces practically an infinite variety of snowflake designs, never exactly repeating itself. Each snowflake is like a tiny fingerprint of the winter sky, a signature of the clouds that made it. When one of those little crystals lands on your coat and you marvel at it, you are literally the only person to ever see that exact pattern. And once it melts, that precise shape will never appear again. By now, you can see how every snowflake carries a story in its shape. The next time snow falls around you, maybe you'll pause and wonder, what path did each of those fluttering flakes take? Knowing a bit about their formation, you might feel even more connected to the beauty of that moment, the science making it even more magical. It's amazing how much goes into the creation of a single flake of snow that lands so softly on your coat. Let's talk a bit about some of the people who uncovered these secrets. Humans have been curious about snowflakes for a long time. As we saw, even Kepler in 1611 took a stab at the mystery. But it wasn't until much later that technology let us investigate these tiny crystals directly. One of the earliest recorded scientific musings we already discussed was Kepler. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and we meet a man named Wilson A. Bentley, often affectionately called Snowflake Bentley today. Bentley was a farmer in Jericho, Vermont, a place known for its cold, snowy winters. From a young age, he was mesmerized by the snowflakes that fell on his family farm. He would examine snowflakes under an old microscope that his parents bought him and was struck by their beauty and variety. He famously wrote, "Under the microscope, I found that snowflakes were miracles of beauty. It seemed a shame that this beauty should not be seen and appreciated by others." He made it his life's work to capture that beauty so he could share it. Bentley faced a challenge. How do you preserve something as fleeting as a snowflake long enough to photograph it in the 1880s? Cameras were still pretty new, and photographing through a microscope, photomicrography, was an even bigger challenge. But Bentley was determined. He experimented for years. He attached a bellows camera to his microscope, and working in an unheated room to keep the snowflakes from melting, he patiently waited for the right flakes. Picture Bentley on a winter morning. He would collect snowflakes on a tray or a piece of black velvet outdoors. The dark, cold velvet provided contrast, and didn't melt the flakes immediately. Then he'd carefully transfer one onto a microscope slide using a thin wooden splint or feather, something that wouldn't melt or crush the crystal. All of this had to be done quickly, in frigid air, often by lamplight. Then he would focus the microscope, which was attached to a large camera, and expose a glass photographic plate. The exposure times back then were long, so he had to hold everything steady and hope the snowflake didn't sublimate away before the image was captured. On January 15th, 1885, after much trial and error, Bentley managed to take the world's first photograph of a snowflake. The image was of a small six-pointed star crystal, a bit grainy and not as crisp as modern photos, but it was revolutionary. Over the years, Bentley improved his techniques. He ended up photographing more than 5,000 snowflakes in his lifetime. Each one, he found, was unique. He published many of the photos in articles and even in a book. People were amazed. For the first time, they could see the intricate details of these ice crystals that fall by the millions. Bentley's photographs revealed an astonishing diversity of forms. Some looked like the classic stellar snowflakes. Others were simpler plates or odd, lopsided shapes. He saw triangular crystals, 12-sided ones, which are basically two snowflakes intergrown, and all sorts of variant forms. It was Bentley who really popularized the idea that no two snowflakes are alike. In all his thousands of photographs, no identical ones ever appeared. Bentley's passion reminds us how a single person's curiosity and dedication can reveal the hidden beauty of the world to others. Because of him, people everywhere learned that snowflakes are not just white specks, but miracles of beauty. As he said, each a masterpiece of design. It's heartwarming to think of him out there, winter after winter, laboring in the cold, so that the rest of us could marvel at these images. He never became rich or famous in his lifetime, though his work was respected by scientists of the day. But today, he is something of a legend in the science of snow. Bentley's work laid the foundation for a more scientific exploration of how snowflakes form. His photographs were like a natural catalog that invited explanation. In the 1930s, a Japanese physicist named Ukichiro Nakaya took up that challenge. Nakaya lived in a snowy region, Hokkaido, Japan, and was fascinated by what Bentley had done. He wanted to understand why snowflakes took on the shapes Bentley captured, and he decided to do something bold. He grew snowflakes himself in the lab. Nakaya set up what was essentially a cold laboratory. He had a refrigerated room or chamber in which he could control temperature and humidity, on tiny strings or even on a single hair. Famously, he often used a rabbit hair as a nucleating surface. He would create conditions for ice crystals to form from water vapor, essentially making artificial snowflakes. By adjusting the temperature and humidity in different experiments, he was able to recreate many of the forms found in nature. Over time, Nakaya mapped out the relationship between conditions and the type of snowflake produced. This became known as the Nakaya diagram, a kind of snowflake morphology chart. For instance, Nakaya observed that at temperatures around -2 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, thin plate-like crystals would form, just like Bentley had seen. At around -5 degrees Celsius, 23 degrees Fahrenheit, hollow columns or needles would form. At around -15 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Fahrenheit, large stellar plates and dendrites grew. At -30 degrees Celsius, he saw small plates and columns again. He also noted the role of humidity. Low humidity yielded simpler, smoother crystals, while high humidity produced more complex branched ones. Nakaya poetically described snowflakes as letters sent from heaven. He said that because if you understand the code, the temperature and humidity conditions, you can read the snowflake and infer the story of the cloud it came from. A capped column snowflake, for example, is like a letter that says, I started in a -5 degrees Celsius environment and then went to a -15 degrees Celsius environment. A dendrite says, the air was rich with moisture when I grew. I branched lavishly, and so on. Nakaya's diagram was a huge leap in understanding. It was the first systematic explanation for why snowflakes have different shapes. His work is often summarized with a famous line he wrote, "Snowflakes are letters from the sky." He and his team even made beautiful microscopes and took high-quality photos of the lab-grown snowflakes to compare with natural ones. Observing the growth of snow crystals in the lab is one thing. Understanding the physics behind it is something else. Over the years, other scientists have dug into the why. Why do plates form at some temperatures and columns at others? It turns out to involve some complex surface physics, the different facets of an ice crystal, its basal face, which is the flat face of the hexagon, versus the prism faces, which are the 6 around the sides, have different growth rates depending on temperature. There's something called the surface diffusion and attachment kinetics that vary with temperature in not fully understood ways, which cause that switch. A theory called the branching instability, which I mentioned earlier, explains why branches form at high supersaturation. Basically, once a part of the crystal sticks out, it collects more vapor and thus sticks out more, leading to branching. There is also a surface melting phenomenon. Even below 0 degrees Celsius, the very surface of ice can have a quasi-liquid thin layer, which might affect how molecules attach. All these nuances mean that even today, there are aspects of snowflake formation that scientists are actively researching. In fact, growing an accurate computer model of a snowflake from first principles is still a challenge. We can simulate approximate shapes, but capturing all the fine details is hard. Throughout history and across cultures, snowflakes have captured imaginations. Poets have written about the hush of snowfall and the purity of winter's blanket. Children cut paper snowflakes to hang in windows, trying to recreate those delicate patterns with scissors and paper. We use snowflake symbols in holiday decorations and stories, perhaps without even knowing just how incredible the real ones are. There's something about the gentle, unique beauty of snowflakes that speaks to our sense of wonder. It's no surprise that these tiny crystals have become symbols of purity, individuality, and the quiet beauty of nature. Now let's zoom out for a moment and take in the bigger picture of a snowy scene. Picture this. Dawn breaks after a night of snowfall. You open your door to a world transformed by snow. The morning light makes the fresh snowdrifts glow softly. Every tree branch and rooftop is frosted in white, and the ground is a smooth, unmarred carpet of snow stretching out in all directions. The air is crisp, and your breath puffs out in little clouds. There is a profound silence, the kind that only a thick blanket of snow can bring. As you step forward, the snow crunches gently underfoot, each footstep sound quickly absorbed by the surrounding snow. The whole landscape sparkles as if sprinkled with diamond dust, each tiny crystal catching the sunlight. It's a scene of serene beauty, and one that invites reflection on what lies beneath that blanket of snow. All that soft whiteness around you is actually the result of those countless individual crystals working together. The brightness, the silence, the softness, all emerge from the collective behavior of snowflakes. Let's explore how these snowflakes en masse affect the world around us. First off, why is snow white when ice or water in a glass is clear? It's because of how light interacts with the myriad snow crystals and the air between them. A single snowflake is translucent, and ice is clear in small pieces. But when you have billions of them jumbled together in a snowbank, light enters and gets scattered in so many directions by all those crystal facets and air pockets that it bounces back out in a diffuse way. Essentially, all colors of light are reflected back out from the snow, so it looks white to us, white being the combination of all colors. Sometimes in deep snow or in shadows, you might notice a bluish tinge. That's because the light that has penetrated deeper and bounced around can absorb a bit, and often the longer wavelength colors, reds, get absorbed slightly more, leaving a bluish cast to what exits. But a fresh surface of snow in sunlight is a brilliant white. It's one of the most reflective natural surfaces. If you've ever been outside after a fresh snowfall on a sunny day, you know you almost need sunglasses from the glare. The world seems to shine. This reflectivity has a significant effect on climate. Sunlight that hits snowy areas tends to bounce back to space rather than warming the ground. Snow, in a way, keeps things cooler. It's like a natural mirror. In fact, large snow-covered areas, like Siberia in winter or the polar regions, reflect a lot of solar energy. This is one reason why snow and ice are important in Earth's climate system. When snow cover increases, more sunlight is reflected and the Earth can cool slightly, and when snow cover decreases or melts earlier, the darker ground or ocean exposed absorbs more heat and things warm. It's a delicate feedback loop. And think about insulation. It might sound odd because snow is cold, but snow is actually a very good insulator. Freshly fallen snow is often 90% or more air by volume. Those intricate flakes pile up with lots of space in between. Air, especially still air trapped in small spaces, is a great insulator. Think of how a down jacket works. It traps air in feathers. So a thick layer of snow on the ground keeps the ground underneath warmer than the air above. Animals take advantage of this. Small rodents might burrow under the snow to stay warm, and Arctic foxes will curl up in snow to conserve heat. People have famously made igloos, shelters out of snow blocks. And inside an igloo, with just body heat or a small oil lamp, it can be surprisingly comfortable. Well, relatively, perhaps just around freezing, even if outside the igloo, the air is -40. The snow walls trap the heat inside. If you've ever slept under a heavy blanket, you know the feeling of being cocooned and insulated. Snow covering a landscape is like the Earth's heavy blanket. It also muffles sound. This is something almost everyone notices. After a snowfall, the world sounds quieter. Sound waves are readily absorbed by all those cavities in the snow. The acoustic energy gets dissipated among the complex labyrinth of snow crystals and air pockets. Perhaps you've felt that yourself, stepping outside after a thick snowfall and realizing even your footsteps seem muffled, and distant sounds, a car on the road or the usual city noise, are hushed or absent. It's almost like being in a softly padded world, just you and the gently falling snow. There's a peace to it that's hard to describe. It has to be experienced. And it's not just a subjective impression. It's physically true that a fresh snow cover can significantly dampen sound. Now, consider the bigger hydrological picture. Snow as water storage. In many regions of the world, winter snow is effectively a reservoir of fresh water that gets released slowly during spring and summer melt. Each of those billions of snowflakes that accumulated on mountains and fields through the winter holds water that will quench thirsts months later. If all the winter's snow in the mountains melted at once, you'd have floods, then drought. Instead, Because it sits as snow and gradually melts, it feeds rivers and groundwater in a steady trickle. Entire ecosystems and many human societies depend on that slow release. Think of the Himalayas or Rockies, where snowpack melt feeds rivers that tens of millions of people and countless wildlife rely on. In this way, those gentle snowflakes are nature's time-release water supply. Each snowflake might be tiny, but collectively they are powerful. They can even influence climate and ecosystems. Without winter snowfall storing water in the mountains, many rivers would run low or dry by summer. Those delicate flakes act as a natural reservoir, holding moisture until warmer weather releases it gradually into streams and soils. Whole communities and forests depend on that melting snow. So snowflakes, en masse, become a lifeline, quietly accumulating in winter and quenching the earth in spring. In this way, the elegant art that falls from the sky also nurtures life and balances our environment. And of course, when we think of the feeling of walking in a fresh snowfall, there's also that almost magical hush and purity. The aesthetic and emotional effect of snow on a landscape, turning everything white and clean, softening the hard edges, is something that has inspired art, poetry, and music. The knowledge of what's happening on a microscopic level, instead of ruining that magic, can actually enhance it. Personally, when I see a field of new snow now, I not only see the serene beauty, I also imagine the countless intricate crystals lying there and think about the incredible journey each one had. It adds a layer of wonder. This smooth blanket is actually composed of tiny stars of ice. Knowing that, you might appreciate the scene even more. If you've ever seen a halo around the sun or moon on a cold winter day or night, a big ring of light, that's another gift from ice crystals. High up in the sky, thin clouds of ice, composed of tiny hexagonal plate crystals or columns, can cause sunlight or moonlight to refract in such a way that a halo appears at 22 degrees around the sun or moon. Those ice crystals are like tiny prisms, bending the light at specific angles, stemming from that 60-degree internal angle of the hexagon. The result is an ethereal ring of light. Sometimes you even see little rainbow-like spots to the side of the sun, called sundogs, which are also caused by ice crystals, oriented in certain ways, acting like mini lenses. So even when ice crystals remain aloft and don't fall as snow, they still create beauty, optical phenomena that have been marveled at for ages. It's all connected to the same hexagonal crystal structure of ice. Even on the ground, ice crystals continue to do beautiful things. On a very cold morning, you might notice delicate frost on the windows, with patterns that look like fern leaves or feathers. That's essentially water vapor from the air depositing on the cold glass in fractal patterns, not unlike snowflake growth, though constrained to a surface. And sometimes every twig and blade of dry grass is coated with a sparkling coat of ice. That's hoarfrost, which forms when water vapor freezes directly onto exposed surfaces on cold, clear nights. The result is that trees and fields look like they're sugared or encrusted with countless tiny ice crystals, each a miniature snowflake of sorts that grew in place on that object. It's like the clouds came down to decorate everything with the same artistry they use for snowflakes. All these are reminders that the world of snow and ice is not just cold and harsh. It's intricately, delicately beautiful, and deeply interconnected with Earth's systems. Now, as a final journey for tonight, let's imagine something a little different. I invite you to picture yourself as a tiny snowflake. It might sound unusual, but stay with me. This is a gentle flight of imagination. By becoming the snowflake in our mind's eye, we can experience everything we've learned in a soothing, personal way. So, imagine, high above the ground, within a cold, dark cloud, you are born as a snowflake. In the beginning, you're not a snowflake at all, just a microscopic droplet of super-chilled water floating among millions of others in the cloud. You don't feel solid. You are fluid and free, suspended weightlessly in the gray gloom of the cloud. All around you is misty and dim. Tiny particles drift by. A bit of dust here, a speck of soil or pollen there. You're unaware of them until one particular particle bumps into you. In an instant, that little collision changes everything. You seize onto that mote of dust like a long-lost friend. And in that moment, you freeze. You become solid ice. It's as if a soft spark went off inside you. Suddenly you have form, a delicate structure starting to grow. You, the newborn snowflake, are now a minute crystal of ice hugging that speck of dust at your core. If you had eyes, our imaginative eyes, let's say, you might see a faint glimmer around you as nearby water molecules begin to notice your presence. They start to gather, drawn to your tiny frozen form. You feel yourself growing, stretching out tiny arms in 6 directions. At first, it's just a hexagon, a flat, 6-sided disc so small that it would take a powerful microscope to even glimpse you. But you are expanding, second by second, as more water vapor molecules land on you and lock into place. In this quiet cloud, you can't see the sun, but there's a diffuse gray light permeating the place. The air is eerily still yet full of tiny motions. Water molecules drifting, little drafts swirling. You, however, feel a kind of gentle pull from every direction as vapor gathers onto you. Each time a molecule joins your structure, you feel a faint tickle of growth. It's a pleasant, natural sensation, like slowly stretching your arms after a long, cozy nap. There's no pain, no shock, just a gentle unfolding, exactly as it should be. Soon, your 6 sides begin to form arms, little extensions reaching out. Each arm grows longer and a bit more elaborate as the seconds pass. You don't know why it's 6, but that's the shape the universe has given you. Around you in the cloud, your snowflake siblings are being born too. If you could look about, you'd see countless tiny crystals blinking into existence and growing alongside you, each on their own path. You might sense them in a faint way, a sparkle here, a glint there in the murk of the cloud. But you're all spaced comfortably apart, each dancing in its own little patch of sky. There's plenty of room and plenty of vapor for everyone. You continue to grow, developing more complex patterns by the moment. Your 6 arms elongate more and more. Now, little side branches bud from those arms as the cloud offers up abundant water vapor for you to adorn yourself. You might imagine this as feeling like growing 6 delicate fingers, then each finger sprouting its own tiny fingers. Yet it's effortless. You simply crystallize further, guided by the physics of the cold air, all while gently suspended in place. At some point, a soft breeze within the cloud nudges you and your neighboring snowflakes. You all begin to move, slowly at first. You realize you are drifting downward. You have become heavy enough, though still incredibly light, to begin falling. But it doesn't feel like falling as in plummeting. It's more like you're floating or gliding. The other snowflakes around you start to descend too, each twirling or rocking slightly. You are part of this quiet, invisible ballet. The movement causes more air to flow over your surfaces, bringing a fresh supply of water molecules to you. You grow a bit faster for a brief while, sprouting even more intricate ice filigree along your arms. As you fall, the air around you changes subtly. Perhaps the cloud is not uniform. You might pass through a region with slightly drier air, and you notice your growth slowing. It's as if you're taking a gentle rest. You simply drift, with no new additions to your crystalline form for a time. Then, a few moments later, you enter a more humid pocket again and resume growing. Little new buds and side branches appear on your arms where they had paused. It's a rhythmic, natural process. Like breathing. Grow a bit, pause a bit, grow again, all dictated by the environment you're moving through. By now, you have quite a beautiful structure. You may be a couple of millimeters across, large enough that if a person had a magnifying glass, they could make out your general shape. You are a classic 6-armed snowflake, each arm adorned with delicate patterns of its own. If you were aware, you might feel a sense of completion or pride. You've become a unique piece of crystal art. Of course, as a snowflake, you simply are what you are, feeling no pride or purpose, just continuing your gentle descent. All around you, other snowflakes are falling too. Some look similar to you, others are different forms. Perhaps you see a slender, needle-like one zip by, or a small plate twirling around. But none are exactly like you. You are truly one of a kind. There's no competition, no worry. Each of you is simply following the path laid out, floating together toward the world below. Soon, you find that you have fallen out of the cloud. One moment, you were in a hazy world of gray. The next, you emerge into clearer air below the cloud. It's like stepping out of a fog into open space. Sunlight, actual direct sunlight, reaches you now, and oh, how you sparkle. The sun's rays hit your intricate surfaces, and you glint like a tiny star in the sky. If someone far below were looking up just at the right time, they might see a tiny flash of rainbow colors as your facets bend the sunlight. For a moment, you truly shine. A miniature prism floating in the air. Now that you're out of the cloud, it's colder and the air is drier. You no longer gather new molecules. Your growth is done. You might feel, if a snowflake could feel, a sense of contentment. You have achieved your full form. Now it's all about the journey downward, gently, peacefully. You continue to drift earthward. A light breeze might catch you, causing you to sail a bit sideways, perhaps even carrying you over to a different area than where you started falling. You have no control over it. You simply go where the air takes you. At times, you might collide softly with another snowflake. Once, a smaller flake bumps one of your arms. For a moment, the two of you stick together, twirling as a pair. But then, a slight gust separates you again, and you part ways, each continuing on its own path to the ground. If you had stuck, you would have fallen a bit faster due to the extra weight, but not by much. Still a gentle descent. Encounters like that are brief, like little hellos in the sky, and then each snowflake moves on. As you get lower, the world below comes into clearer view. It's late evening now. Your journey from cloud to ground has taken some time. The lights of a quiet neighborhood wink up at you. You see rooftops blanketed in white from snow that fell before you. There are dark, graceful shapes of trees, their branches outlined in snow. A warm, golden light spills from a few windows of houses, creating glowing rectangles on the snow-covered yards. Perhaps a wisp of smoke curls upward from a chimney, dissipating into the cold air. It's a peaceful winter scene that you're about to become a part of. Streetlights on the road are surrounded by fuzzy halos in the lightly falling snow. Those halos are caused by tiny ice crystals like you scattering the light. You're contributing to that soft glow. The ground is approaching, slowly but surely. You drift over a small garden fence toward an open yard. The earth is already blanketed by earlier snow, so your landing will be on a soft cushion of your predecessors. Your descent slows even more as you encounter very slightly warmer air near the ground. A gentle updraft from the day's residual warmth rises, momentarily balancing your fall. You almost seem to hover for a second in midair, just a few inches above a fence post that is heaped with snow. In that moment, if you had any thought, perhaps it would be one of calm anticipation. The journey is nearly over. And then, with the lightest touch imaginable, you settle onto the pile of snow on the fence post. The soft snow beneath you gives just a little, cushioning your landing like a pillow. You nestle among the other flakes, your delicate form coming to rest in perfect comfort. You've joined a community of crystals that arrived moments or hours before. Each of you is unique, yet together you form something greater, a seamless blanket of white. The night is still and silent. Overhead, the cloud has passed and the sky has partially cleared. The crescent moon casts a faint silver light on the ground, and countless stars shimmer in the clear sky. As you lie there, it's as if you are in quiet conversation with those stars. A tiny crystal below, distant fires above, both twinkling in the night. The air is calm. The temperature is well below freezing, so you remain solid and intact. You have never experienced warmth. Cold is all you know, and it suits you just fine. Hours drift by in this peaceful state. You and the other snowflakes on the fence post form a soft, powdery layer. Occasionally, a whisper of wind might rustle the surface, or a tiny creature, perhaps a winter mouse, scurries under the fence causing a vibration. But for the most part, the night is uneventful. You are in a kind of slumber, along with millions of your fellow snowflakes spread out on the ground. Eventually, the eastern sky begins to lighten. Dawn is coming. A faint blue glow turns the horizon sky from black to deep indigo to pale gray. The stars fade, one by one, and the crescent moon, now low, is the last to vanish. In the stillness before sunrise, the world holds its breath. You might hear a distant bird begin to sing a gentle morning song, a lone signal that night is ending. Then the first rays of the rising sun peek over the horizon. As the sun rises, its rays fall upon the snow-covered fence post. A golden light spreads across the snowy yard. You feel the sunlight touch you. At first, it's very slight, just a gentle warmth that makes you sparkle brilliantly. In that first light, you and the surface crystals around you glitter, reflecting a tiny rainbow of colors as you did in the air. It's as if the whole blanket of snow is covered in gemstones, all thanks to countless facets like yours catching the sun. The light grows stronger and the warmth increases just enough that something new begins to happen. The delicate edges of your arms and those of your neighboring snowflakes start to soften. You have existed so far in a realm of cold, but now warmth is easing in. The pristine, sharp lines of your structure blur ever so slightly. You are beginning to melt. It happens slowly and gracefully. You don't feel pain or fear. After all, you are a crystal, just changing state. If anything, if you were conscious, you might feel a sense of fulfillment. You fell from the sky, you adorned the earth, and now you gently transform again. Drop by drop, the intricate pattern that you are relaxes into liquid water. Starting at the tips of your arms, the ice turns into tiny beads of water. They merge and run down into the snow below. You, as a distinct snowflake, gradually lose your shape and become part of a tiny liquid micro-puddle in the snowpack. The dust mote that was your core is released. Maybe a puff of breeze will carry that particle back up into the atmosphere one day, where it might seed another snowflake. The water that was you seeps down into the snow beneath, or maybe along the wood of the fence post. In that process, you blend with countless other melted flakes. Your unique pattern is gone, but the water that made you is still very much around, now joining with others. If you could have any last awareness, it might be one of completion and unity. You were a crystal of singular beauty, and now you have merged into something larger. The blanket of snow becoming water that will nourish the ground or evaporate into the air. Perhaps later that day, a bit of your water will sink into the soil by the garden to be taken up by a tree's roots. Perhaps a bit will catch a ride on a breeze as the ground breathes out moisture and head back up into the sky to eventually form a cloud again. In any case, your journey as a snowflake has gently ended, but the particles and water that composed you move on to become parts of other natural stories. And so, our imagined life as a snowflake comes to a close. From a speck in a cloud, to a glittering crystal dancing through the sky, to a fleck of snow on a fence, to a droplet soaking into the earth. What a journey for a tiny bit of water. It's a quiet journey, but in its own way, a miraculous one. As we come back to ourselves now, let's reflect on the journey we took through the life of a snowflake. We ventured high into the clouds and down to the molecular level to see how each snowflake takes shape. We followed it floating to the ground and even imagined its gentle melt under the morning sun. Through this, we've uncovered how something as ordinary as a snowflake is actually extraordinary when we look closely. Throughout this night, we've explored the intricate science and the almost spiritual beauty of how snowflakes get their perfect shapes. We've delved into how water molecules bonding at specific angles give rise to six-pointed crystals. We've seen how temperature and humidity guide a snowflake's form, how each flake carries the history of its travel through the clouds. We marveled at the fact that no two are alike, and considered the numbers that make that statement practically certain. We met some of the humans who devoted their lives to studying and capturing these ice miracles, from a farmer with a camera to physicists in cold labs. We connected these tiny crystals to big themes, to quiet winter nights, to global climate, to spring waters, to halos around the moon. It's amazing, isn't it, that when you hold a snowflake on your mitten, or let it land on your tongue, you're interacting with a piece of nature that embodies so much: physics, history, beauty, and wonder. All that complexity and elegance, and yet it feels so simple and serene. I find it comforting and inspiring that the universe has intricacies like this, that something as common as a snowfall is, when examined closely, a cascade of tiny miracles. And knowing this doesn't rob the moment of its magic, it enhances it. Next time snowflakes are falling around you, you might remember that each one is a tiny crystal ballet, following natural laws to end up as a unique gem. Perhaps you'll take an extra moment to appreciate that uniqueness and let it remind you of the wider wonders of nature. The next time you find yourself in a gentle snowfall, you might also feel a bit of personal connection to those flakes. Maybe you'll hold out your glove and catch one, and instead of it just being a cold pinprick of ice, you'll see it for what it is: a delicate sculpture that took maybe an hour to form and fall, shaped by the wind and sky, now briefly resting on your glove. And in that instant, before it melts, you'll know you are witnessing something that has never happened before in exactly that way and will never happen again. It's a fleeting gift of nature's artistry. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the beautiful complexity of our universe as seen through a single snowflake. We've seen how even the smallest things can contain entire worlds of wonder. I hope this exploration has brought you both knowledge and a sense of calm magic about the natural world. Now, as you get cozy and drift towards sleep, imagine those snowflakes gently falling outside in the dark, each one silently spinning, reflecting the moonlight as it settles with its millions of companions on the quiet ground. Feel the sense of peace that comes with that imagery, the hush, the purity, the knowledge that even in stillness, there is a flurry of beautiful activity happening at a tiny scale. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the wonder of snowflakes. Thank you for being here with me on this wintry adventure. Take care, good night, and pleasant dreams.